Love having John Hewlett on as a guest, good friend, knows an awful lot about a lot of things, knows a lot of people. He's going to go over some miracles that have happened out in the Polynesian islands with the church. We're going to talk a little bit about politics. And of course, he's the founder of Cardio Miracle. There are two things in my life that have made a huge difference in the way I feel each and every day. And in my labs, my blood pressure and my gout. And that is fasting and Cardio Miracle. I just went to Egypt and Turkey for 2 months, didn't bring any Cardio Miracle with me. Big, huge mistake. It really does make a difference. Go to cwicmedia.com and scroll down to the bottom and see a video on me talking about how Cardio Miracle has changed things for me. Here we go. All right, welcome to Cwic Show. My name is Greg Mattson, and I am your host. In this episode, we bring back my friend John Hewlett, who's been gone for a couple of months, just as I have been gone for a couple of months out of the country. John, how are you doing?
Hey, Greg, I'm doing great. I think I figured the other day I've been home 7 days of the last 100
Okay.
at my house. Been really busy with a number of things. Did an extended South Pacific journey to some historical church sites that we're identifying. And then also just been really busy traversing the country at different conventions and meetings and things with our business, our Cardio Miracle business, which has been eventful. But boy, I'll tell you, it's nice to be in your own bed, even when you stay at a decent hotel.
Yeah, you know, I've been gone for a very similar amount of time. So longest I've been gone away from my wife is a couple of months. And out in Egypt and Turkey, I did not have a comfortable bed at a nice hotel. I'll tell you that. I felt like I was sleeping on a marble slab half the time. How these guys in the Middle East, they're like, I don't understand it. I really don't. These beds are absolute rocks. I'm not sure what they're made of, but I mean, I like a firm mattress, but firm an American. From an American, you still have a little bit of give. The Egyptian firm is very different.
I think that's because they all weigh less than 150 pounds. And so
yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah,
it doesn't impact them as much as people who have a little more girth than that. But yeah, it's kind of like sleeping probably in a jail cell. I've talked to people that I know who served some time in prison, and they used to gather the cardboard when they could and put it underneath their little teeny mattress to try to give them some semblance of comfort. They said it was horrific. It was like sleeping on straight wood slab for those who have that unfortunate experience.
Yeah. We get up and go all day long, so we get pretty tired by the end of the night. So we sleep anyway, typically. But yeah, it's different. The other thing it's being gone that long out of the country is really odd. I lost track of time. I lost track of days. I didn't know what most of the time I had no clue what day it was, and it didn't matter. It just didn't matter what was going on. I had pulled myself out mostly of my business during the time and running these tours, and it's
well, it's a lot of pressure being a tour guide, really. I mean, you're constantly, it's kind of like being a bishop giving your ward conference talk 24/7. I mean, you're right. Everybody's watching everything you do. Everyone wants to ask you questions. I mean, you're totally. It's like being a car salesman with a never-ending stream of customers, but that want your attention. But no, I was the same way. We were at sea for 26 days, which was the longest we've ever done it, and it was interesting because we left the day after the inauguration because we had an inauguration event that we were involved in Washington, which was interesting. But we left the day after, and so many great things happened in our country while we were gone. In fact, even during the process, I sold my house that I had been on the market for a number of months. I mean, so many good things happened. I kept turning to my wife and saying, maybe we should just stay at sea. Things are going better in every aspect of life. And then I have a great staff and team running like running the business and doing things. And we had a spiritual feast. We met some of the greatest fellow Latter-day Saints and other people who we were able to talk to about the gospel. And then I want to share with you the experiences in the South Pacific of President John Alexander Nelson, who, in my opinion, is right up there with Brother Groberg and Matthew Cowley and all of the great stories of the Polynesian faith. John Alexander Nelson, Dr. Brad Nelson of the Emotion Code, his grandfather, had some of the most amazing experiences ever recorded in a missionary journal. And we're actually working on a documentary of his life and mission experiences to help with the Polynesian faith and the faith of those people, and with all of us who are nowadays, we're hungering and thirsting after priesthood miracles and things to help bolster us through these challenging, fiery darts of politics and corruption in our government and everything else that we're all facing.
Yeah, and I want to get to that. We're going to get to that in just a minute because I know there's some incredible stories there that you want to share. I want to go directly though to something else, and I want to get your thoughts on this. This is what I was thinking about when I was bringing you up on the interview. What is going to happen with the tariffs, John? What are we doing with these tariffs? What is it? How's it going to go? I've done some research on the tariffs. It's something I'm unsure of. Where is it going? Are we just pulling the Band-Aid off here and we've got a little bit of pain while we rip the Band-Aid off and then everything's going to be fine? Well, what's going to happen with the tariffs?
Of course, my net worth is kind of like one of the stars in the firmament compared to Elon Musk. And so the reality is, Greg, I've been in business and in finance and been a political observer literally since I was a teenager. I mean, I used to read 2 newspapers a day growing up, mainly the sports section, but I also caught a lot of the politics. But, we're trillions of dollars in debt, trillions. We couldn't even relate. People, I remember back in 92 when Ross Perot came out and said, we can't keep up this trend or else we're all.
I voted for Ross twice.
I voted. I handed out Ross Perot tapes in the 90s and literally left my Republican background to support Ross Perot's candidacy because I thought it was that desperate then. That was in the early 90s. Mm-hmm. Well, this is so outrageous. And the discoveries. I mean, I every day say to myself, how can anyone think that Musk and Doge and these billionaire guys who are helping him do this, who are neglecting their business, who could be doing other things, just like Donald Trump could be doing other things than taking bullets all day long, literally and figuratively, to try to save our country? How can we continue on this path when we've had 20% inflation that was really possibly more than that? I mean, they have jimmied the numbers in the economic forecasts, and to see what U.S. aid has been funding and looking at those literal things. And now it's kind of like when I first read the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. And anyone who's really interested in understanding the Federal Reserve and our economy and the dollar should read that. It's G. Edward Griffin's seminal work that is so enlightened so many libertarians and conservatives, because it talks about how the Federal Reserve was formed. It was essentially a financial cartel back in 1918, 17. And so when you look all of that in perspective, the tariffs, I mean, look at what he's accomplished. Now, the thing about it is it's kind of like having a football coach or a personal trainer who's kicking your fanny around the gym every day or yelling at you in your face, with their veins bulging out, trying to correct your behavior. And we have been living on borrowed time. You've traveled the world. You see how the rest of the world lives. And you live in Scottsdale, Arizona. I live in the mountains of Utah, in the Mirror Lake area in the summer, and St. George in the winter. We don't have the problems. I've been in New York City and Miami, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Janet and I, even though New York has all kinds of excitement and good plays and everything else, we walk down the street and we're like, who are we? It's almost hard to even identify who we are as people when you're in among that mass of humanity. So many, I mean, people are yelling profanities as they're walking down the street, and people are putting mud all over their bodies as they're sitting there naked on the sidewalk. I mean, we live in a crazy, crazy world. And those of us in the West, in these somewhat sane bubbles of humanity, I don't think we realize how perilous this situation is. And personally, I believe that, if people are sitting around, the biggest thing that I find funny is that people are saying, well, my 401k or the stock market, look at the stock market. Well, the stock market is the most overinflated, overhyped financial tool that is out there. And the reality is, I remember 4 or 5 years ago when people said it should never go over 20,000. It should really be valued at 10,000, because when you have real companies, most of the companies that are drawing the Dow down are the speculative companies. It's the pharmaceutical companies that have been stealing us blind over the last 6 years, the hospitals that are out of control with the healthcare costs. It's the AI companies, it's the tech companies. It's mainly the tech companies and everything. And they're having a modest adjustment because we're essentially we're saying to people, why, when we have now it was not more than a year or two ago, people were saying, well, we're probably unfunded liabilities of 90 billion. Now they're saying unfunded liabilities of approaching 50 to 100 trillion. I mean, it's hard to even grasp that. And so to me, thank heavens we have somebody who, for the first time in my lifetime, since actually Dwight Eisenhower, that is basically saying enough's enough. We've got to get a handle on this runaway train before all of it goes out. And that's why, I don't know if you saw the interview with Musk and the guy from Brett Baer from Fox, and he's had all these tech billionaire leaders, CEOs, who've all volunteered their time to come help Musk. And the universal theme among all of them was not, oh, well, we want to make more money. They were saying, if we don't do something, everything is lost. Everything's on the table. So my belief is kind of,
and I believe that. I believe that that's right.
I do too. But the media, and I mean, I don't know if you saw these rallies where people are being handed brochures and they're being
on
paid
Saturday,
by the hour. I mean, this is such a con job. And the reality is, though, most people don't take the time to do their own research. They don't read, they don't listen, they don't observe. They're not a student of history. They don't understand politics. And no offense. And I'm just an observer myself. But my goodness, if we're not willing to, I mean, I don't have a problem financially. But as I read in my journal, 5 years ago, Cardio Miracle, I was happy with a $5,000 day. Now we've become a multi-million-dollar company, not as big as we should be with the fantastic product that we have, but and the last year or so has been kind of flat because of a number of reasons. But I'm really concerned about the fixed incomes, and then to hear the nonsense that they're going to cut Medicare benefits and to cut Social Security. That's absolutely false.
They know it.
I sent an email to some friends of mine who know Bobby Kennedy well. And I said, please tell Kennedy to tell everybody in the Trump administration, start talking about DOGE saving Social Security, not cutting Social Security, saving Medicare, not cutting Medicare. That's what I think it's all about. And if we don't get it under control, all of these things, and people who have no savings, investments, land, house equity, food storage, a safe haven to go to, it's going to be chaotic. And, certainly fulfillment probably of prophecy, but I'm all for what the president's trying to do. The style is sometimes abrasive, but to me, it's very much like a parent having to get an unruly child under control and occasionally having to use the velvet glove with a steel hand.
Yeah, and by the way, right now as I'm looking at it, the market's up 1.18%. So it's turning back up, hopefully, and it'll maybe even grab all of its gains back. Who knows? But that's not the point. I mean, the point is that you've got there's only 40% of the United States adults actually have anything in the market at all, right?
Exactly.
So you've got 60% of the U.S. adults that have this has no bearing on them whatsoever. Number one. Number two, we've moved in our economy, John, in the last 50, 60 years, and it started before that, but especially the last 50 to 60 years, into a stock economy, which says the economy is based on the value of stock. Well, what that's really saying is the elites and the rich are concerned about the stock market more than anybody else.
Right.
And they care very little about the average income of blue collar workers and of middle income America. And so you've got, let's focus on the stock market and not on the income. And yet the income today, you've got people of the millennials and Gen Z that can't even afford a house because the values have gone up so high, their incomes haven't increased. And even with two incomes in the home, sometimes they're making less than you and I would have been making 30 years ago. 40 years ago as young adults. And so it's crushing them. And so you've got all the boomers who've got all these 401ks and these values that are up there. Great for them. They're wonderful. They've got a good retirement. That's what they plan. That's great. But you've got the other half of America that has nothing in a 401k and all the young adults in America that are saying, why am I making so little? Why do I make so little? And so you've got this disparity that has gone. And here's the funny thing. The Democrats used to be for that group that wasn't making anything.
Exactly.
And now they're all about the stock market. They're all about the elites because they've gone and they've captured all of the elites. They've captured all of the institutes,
the big corporations,
the institutions in the United States. And all of a sudden, you've got blue collar America, kind of like they went with Reagan when they voted for Reagan. They've moved over to the Republicans, and now you've got the United Auto Workers of America actually siding with Trump on the tariffs. It's the craziest thing.
Well, the classic is Elon Musk, who 5 years ago was the darling of the left, and now they want to torture him. And, I mean, it is crazy. I mean, here you have that they wanted everyone to have electric cars. Everyone should drive a Tesla. The whole industry changed. And then now they've turned on him like dogs because he happens to support an abrasive, truth speaking most of the time, exaggerates president who I believe loves our country. I just believe that. I mean, they say, that, and then it's like, and like you see people whose children are impacted by undocumented folks. And I'm sure that I have undocumented folks that are probably helping take care of my yard. I don't know. I don't go through all the employment records of everyone. And I've had workers come here that go and pick up the people standing there at Walmart and all that and hire them for the day. I mean, I understand that. And I certainly understand those that are trying to get away from tyranny. But again, I stand in line as a now almost a 73-year-old and have to take off my shoes because one guy at the airport, because one guy long ago put a bomb in his tennis shoes. And that's completely, I don't know.
The TSA, when the TSA was formed, the TSA has never caught a terrorist, ever. Not once in their history have they ever caught a terrorist, someone trying to put something like a bomb on a plane or anything like that, ever. We move into so many things in the government. We move and change things. I'm not saying we shouldn't have some type of screening process, but we move and we react in a way. It's the tail wagging the dog so many times where we move ourselves to the lowest common denominator possible in every avenue of government. And that's why government is so inefficient.
Horrible.
It's going toward the lowest common denominator in everything, and business does the exact opposite.
Well, and it's interesting because I know the pains of being an employer, and the reality is there is people who own businesses, people who are successful are often resented, even in very subtle ways, by people who have success. I mean, there are podcasters who are very jealous of Cwic Media and Greg Mattson because you've been successful, and everyone wants to get a piece of the action. People don't realize how much work it takes to do something. That's why I'm a huge fan of journals. I go back and read my journals 5, 8, 10 years ago and realize what I was dealing with and going through. And I'm like, oh my, that's wonderful. And again, what's a journal? It's essentially like your own personal scripture. And so that's why the scriptures have value, is we're reading about the mistakes and problems and challenges that people had in former days and try to apply them to our life in current days. And that's why people should be students of history and see that we are on the precipice of losing everything that we have value in our society. And had we not had this last 100 plus days or 100 days, we were on the verge of total, abortions on the street corner, perhaps, or having, our entire country overrun by people who shouldn't be here. What's wrong with having laws? I mean, it's interesting because I occasionally make comments on my high school reunion website, and I have a bunch of, woke, liberal, former and current LDS people who attack me because I happen to think that that Tucker Carlson makes sense to me most of the time, and Megyn Kelly, and that I think that that I'm against Hamas, that I think the Jews are the chosen people, and that we should support that. I even was attacked by one of my high school members of the Jewish persuasion because she said Tucker was so anti-Semitic, and I thought, well, that's interesting because Trump has been the best friend of Israel, according to Yama. He's been the best friend Israel's ever had in his lifetime. So, it's so contradictory. It's almost like it is Trump derangement syndrome combined with PTSD of what we've dealt with the last 6 years, which has been crazy. Actually, 5 years. Since March of 2020 is when the lockdown craziness started. Ironically, 2 weeks before, Cardio Miracle and myself was in the second episode of Supplements Revealed, which was the thing that launched us as an immune support, cardiovascular support, all at the same time. So within 2 weeks of the shutdown, we had our breakthrough moment of being endorsed at the highest levels by some of the top alternative health people. And now I watch Tucker and Megyn and Joe Rogan and everything else, and they're talking to everybody and saying, oh, hey, if we should have been taking vitamin D. I was screaming from the rooftops. I was contacting legislators. I was doing everything possible from 2020 to 2024 to have 23 to have any semblance of sanity of people having natural immune support instead of the tyranny and takeover of our government by what happened, which is now coming out major. Studies are coming out. The damage is being assessed. And yet, so I view the economy as the same thing. If the children of Israel had to walk in the wilderness for 40 years, for heaven's sakes, we should be able to deal with a little bit of food inflation or some adjustments after trying to get a runaway train under control for 50, 60 years, or actually back probably to the roaring 20s, get that under control. So I think we need to gird up our loins, watch what we spend, pay down our debt, find ways to be more self-sufficient, and cling to the gospel and the important truths that we're dealing with, and then participate as citizens in getting honorable men and women to represent us, because it's essentially been a den of thieves for many, many, many years.
Yeah, and that's one of the things they're going after now, right? Doge is going after, why are these senators and Congress individuals making so much money? They come in, they've got a certain network, they walk out 20 years later, and they're
100 million. It's ridiculous.
mega multimillionaires, and that's a problem. And that's the other thing about Doge, right? Is it's not just a matter of saving dollars, because you've only got a certain percentage of the U.S. economy that they're going to be able to change. When you're talking about the other side, which is military spending and Social Security and things that we're not really messing with, right? That's the bulk of of what the government is paying for. But what you do have is you have payoffs and you have corruption within that Doge area. That, to me, even more than the waste, is what is crucial, because those people are being paid off and those organizations are having money siphoned to them, our money siphoned to them, that changes policy, that changes campaigns, that changes elections. That is the crucial thing to me, is getting the corruption and the banana republicanism taken out of the U.S. I do want to go back to the tariff just for a minute here, because I look at these things, and again, I don't know if this is the right thing or not. I know that something has to be done, and I'm willing to say, hey, let's try this out. Maybe this is the way to go. Maybe we can even lower taxes if this works out.
They will lower taxes.
Yeah, I think they will. But this is interesting. Some of the things that I did pull up on it. George Washington, in the Tariff Act of 1789, is the first one to put tariffs into place, and he put a broad 5% tariffs on almost every product coming into the United States. He believed that that's what needed to be done, and he became a protectionist in that sense, right? Going beyond that, he put together what was called the Revenue Cutter Service a year later, which ended up becoming the U.S. Coast Guard. That's what it originally was a tariff guarding the imports that were coming in from on the coasts, right? That's what the Coast Guard was to start off with. Alexander Hamilton was an advocate of tariffs. President Abraham Lincoln said, "Give us a protective tariff and we will have the greatest nation on earth." And Teddy Roosevelt, probably one of your heroes, I'm guessing, one of my heroes, said, "Our past experience shows that great prosperity in this country has always come under a protective tariff." Now, that hasn't always been the case. I've seen where tariffs have been imposed and trade wars start, and they don't always work out. But right, going back to the founding of the country, there was a belief by many of the very influential and powerful founders that tariffs should be in place.
Well, I agree. And the thing that's interesting is the proof is in the pudding. The people are lined up to put their businesses back in America. And we've given away our sovereignty by giving up our manufacturing and our own self-sufficiency in key industries over the years. And, those of us in the West have an agrarian background, and then we also have a tourism background and a lifestyle background. The lifestyle that we enjoy in the West is almost second to none in the world. Not as many people, not as much ghetto, not as many of all those types of things. And the principles of the gospel are self-reliance. And there's no question that we probably need our own form of Doge to go through the church bureaucracy, because the skirts aren't totally clean. There's a lot of interesting things that have happened. There's a lot of construction companies that have done really well in the last number of years that are related to the building programs of the church. There's lots of employees. There's carpet companies. There's people. I think I met somebody once who had a multi-million-dollar business from doing the folding doors in all of the.
I know them. Yes.
Throughout the world, and again, I'm not criticizing that. Those are needs that need to be filled. But the reality is, commerce is commerce. Enterprise is enterprise, and we live in a situation where we have serious problems with gainful employment People through the last couple of years feel that they're entitled to work from their house and not be accountable to anyone, and they're entitled to everything under the sun, and it's really difficult. And so it's a challenging time, and we have that group between, they're probably now about 20 years old and 40. That group really has some interesting challenges, and that's why many are living with their folks and can't find a place to live, but a lot of times we're finding that their work ethic is a little suspect as well. And the baby boomer parents, or the parents like myself, perhaps spoiled them too much or enabled them too much or whatever. I remember my kids always coming home to me and saying, all the kids in the neighborhood are making fun of me and say, well, if your dad's so rich, why do you have to work? And I used to tell them that the reason that your dad has done well is because he learned how to work from his family, and that he started working. And so my kids are going to work, even though we can afford a gardener. You're going to take care of our yard. You're going to do some of the things that I've done. And fortunately, my 5 children have a pretty good work ethic, and that's important. But I see people that I love, and they're just constantly enabling many of their family. And I know that when we look at some of the wealth, and the church members have so much wealth because of the principles we learned on missions, we learned in the church. I mean, people often will say to me, man, you Latter-day Saints, you have singers. I mean, I was looking the other day, Jewel and Christina Aguilera, and I mean, all these people were raised LDS. Many of them. Well, Juliana Huff was, I was the bishop of her father when they were newlyweds. So, a lot of these people have church background. And then I sit and see our podcasting brothers that are now from another mother in a lot of ways that are trying to profit off of just being antagonists to the church. And I'm like, yes. Yeah, one popped up right before conference, and he said, I'm going to do a marathon for the next 3 days or the next 2 days and expose all of the lies that are being perpetuated in general conference. And I thought after each session, man, I don't know what he was going to say about this session, because it was just basic Christianity and common sense in this particular session of conference. So I thought
that this conference was great. I was so happy to see there was so much direct, it was so much more direct than oftentimes we've been getting lately. That's how I felt. I felt like you actually had a couple of call outs on practices, and, abortion was one of them, and a direct that said, look, there is repentance as part of the plan of salvation. And there is, what you are becoming and what you need to do, because so oftentimes I feel like the church now is focused so much on, what do I get? In other words, how much does God love me? And that is only one side of the coin, right? It's not just that God loves me. That's obviously an important thing to understand, and maybe it's the first thing you got to know, but that's not all. I mean, the evangelicals believe that, right? God really loves me, and I believe, and that's it. And it's like, no, there's a whole other side of the coin that we can't lose, which is, do you love God? And how do you love God? And what do you do? If you love me, obey my commandments, right? It's like that whole side sometimes is getting lost, especially in our culture in the church. And it's this, as I say, teddy bear Jesus, it's like, well, I just need somebody to love me. And as long as I'm comforted and loved, then that's it. And I just see the adversary laughing, falling off his armchair as he watches this, laughing, saying, you guys have all lost the message of actual exaltation and who you're becoming. It's working.
Well, let me say that the elephant in the room is the wealth of the church. And that seems to be really under attack and trying to undermine things. And yet, you go back historically, and the original evangelists, the original mega churches, what their whole message was: if you follow Christ, you'll be wealthy, you'll be successful. Robert Schuller, Norman Vincent Peale, they were all minister financial evangelists that were preaching the gospel of prosperity by following Jesus. And so the Latter-day Saints are the epitome of that if you follow and work hard and develop yourself. Look at what the missionary program has done. I love the brother who spoke, who looked like, that he had just gotten his suit from a secondhand store. Maybe he had just lost a bunch of weight. And I thought, these wonderful South American brethren and sisters that standing up there who raised themselves out of poverty and have become now general authorities of arguably the wealthiest church per capita in the world. And look at the background of Jeff Holland. Look at the background of David Bednar. Look at the background of many of these brethren. President Nelson, his parents weren't totally active and faithful growing up. He went beyond that. Then Brother Kieran being a convert, some of the general authorities being converts. That was unheard of in my day. Everyone's was a Richards, a Ballard, a Smith, and they were all related through these lines of people that came through plural marriage from the other side that have ended up being the Latter-day leaders and identified as such through their patriarchal blessings. So
I am still looking for the blue collar apostle, John. I want the blue collar apostle. Where is he?
Well, let me think. Where, in the olden days, prior to the emergence of CES, it would have been one of the CES people.
Sure, that's about the closest we get.
About the closest, but as things changed,
a Packer, for example,
things changed in the 90s, the late 80s and 90s, where a CES job was actually sufficient to provide for a family. I remember the era. I'm old enough, Greg, where Marion D. Hanks and Bruce R. McConkie, Joseph Phil, they had to sell their church books in order to subsidize the meager existence that they were being provided as general authorities. My father was called on a mission to be a mission president in 1969, and he wasn't a wealthy man. In fact, he lost his business while he was on his mission. And that actually happened more times than not, that people would go for 3 years, lose their practice, lose their business, lose whatever, and come home and be out of work and cause challenges for their family through the service. So that's I think that's facilitated calling more successful people as stake presidents, calling more successful people, financially successful as mission presidents and church leaders, et cetera, so they can afford to do that. I had an epiphany during conference when Elder Stevenson, who, it's not an uncommon thing, or it's common knowledge that he had an IPO that, put him in the billionaire mark of wealth, personal wealth. And he was talking about catching a red eye with his wife in an airport overseas. And I thought, this guy can afford his own 737 if he wants. And he's doing red eyes in his late 60s or 70s because he's on the Lord's errand. And people say, well, they get upgraded to first class or whatever. Well, let me tell you, if you're over 6'2", even business class and the little cubicles that they have in some of these airlines, you can't sleep. It's not that comfortable. It is nice. It's certainly better than sitting back in coach. But I can just tell you that we have all these brethren, and then the wolves out there that are taking shots at the wealth of the church, and the brethren get free tuition to BYU or whatever for their kids and grandkids. And I'm like, these men, and the majority of these men, are giving up a life of leisure that most people would dream of to travel the world, bear witness of Christ, associate with the saints. Yes, they're revered. Yes, they get a certain gratification of and spiritual experience. But these are people working into their 80s and 90s that
hundreds
that in many cases haven't seen their grandkids' baseball games, that haven't been able to go to even important family events because they're being assigned to fly all over the world. And I know that's true with all of these young 70s, 70s that are in their 50s, that are in the peak earning years of their career. They're leaving being partners in law firms. They're leaving being noted surgeons. They're doing all of these things, successful business people, because they're committed. So when you look at that as a whole, it's a darn impressive group of people who are totally committed. And people talk about the wealth and the general authority wealth. They probably have paid more tithing than, many countries themselves. And they don't even bat an eye, because they know that the prosperity that they've been blessed with is merely been a gift for them to try to serve and help others and be able to do what they do.
John, you were on your trip. You visited the South Pacific. I wanted to cover that before we finish here. I want you to talk a little bit about your visits and what's going on out there. And I know you've got a certain tie to Samoa as well.
Well, I do. I went on my mission to New Zealand. Part of my mission was in New Zealand. So I love the Polynesian people. But 10 years ago, as I started the Cardio Miracle journey, I met a wonderful guy, Dr. Brad Nelson, and his wife, Jean, who is the author of the Emotion Code. And, Emotion Code, emotional healers, those types of people, they've been kind of walking a tightrope at times in the church, because people have a challenge thinking that it's a substitute for priesthood and all of those types of things. Well, Dr. Brad is truly one of the great saints that I know and devoted. And he preaches the gospel virtually every time he gives a presentation in his own way. Well, his grandfather was called as a missionary to Samoa in 1910 as a 19-year-old cowboy from Calgary, Canada. He ended up getting there by steamer, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whoever, to get to his mission field. Didn't know the language. And within a couple of weeks had numerous spiritual experiences, casting out of evil spirits, a healing of a fellow missionary. And I think at the time there may have been maybe 24 missionaries or maybe a few more in Samoa. Well, he had this amazing experience. So about 3 months into his mission, and this was crazy. And you talk about the far-sighted financial aspect of the church. The church, like in the 1880s or 70s, bought 800 acres in Samoa for a plantation to help take care of the saints and to provide the basis of that area. That's a long ways away back in the 1800s to be making an investment in real estate. Well, that plantation grew crops, and it was 3 miles down to the bay or the harbor of where the natives would bring the produce to put to the ships to trade with the other islands and to get their goods as part of their trading. So Dr. Brad's grandfather, as a young missionary, they had a mission conference at this bay, Samatu Bay or whatever it was. And it's a beautiful spot. So we visited it. And while they were having their mission conference among their couple of dozen missionaries, and while the natives were bringing the fruits and vegetables down to a couple of ships that were parked out in the reef area, just past the reef, they saw a man dressed in a suit of clothes with a top hat over on the other side of the bay. I mean, just, we're talking maybe 50 yards away. And they saw him emerge, and then he walked out on the water and walked around the boat and glanced towards these missionaries on the shore, and then turned around and went back and walked on the bay into the forest and vanished. And the missionaries and their mission president, most of them in their journals and writings to their families recorded this event. So we're not talking about one person. We're talking about
several witnesses.
And so the missionaries were saying, well, President, who was this? Was it one of the 3 Nephites? I mean, the man just walked on the water. And the president paused and pondered and said, no, I think it was John the Revelator. So that was in 1911. And so this young missionary had that experience. So we went to that bay and we filmed that spot and that place, and we're now digging up the collaborative journals of the missionary stories. And we've already found several that have said that it was a family story that had been passed down, and we're trying to find those who had written in his journal. Well, President John Alexander Nelson wrote it in his journal. He wrote it in his journal. Well, so that was that. So at the end of his mission, after having all of these incredible experiences, which there was another sighting of John the Revelator, and I don't know all the details on that one, they think, he sent in his paperwork to be released from his mission after a 3-year mission. And the brethren sent it back and said, Elder Nelson, we appreciate your service. Would like you to stay for 3 more years and be the mission president in 2014 to 16. 22 years old. And they said, oh, and by the way, we had split off, we had closed the mission in Tonga because the Tongans and the Samoans were fighting so much. And so we've only had missionaries in Samoa. We want you to go back to Tonga and open up Tonga for the work again and try to pull together the existing members and organize the Tongan mission at the same time. And he goes,
Tonga's got what, a third of the country or something is LDS?
Well, they had a king that joined at one point. Right now, I think it's at 18%.
Okay,
is what we saw, and we had a great experience there as well. But so the story was, so he takes the 2-day journey to Tonga, seasick the whole way. It meets a fellow. He took along a fellow missionary who knew enough Tongan to translate for him to speak to the people. He didn't know the language. He had told the brethren, "What do I do? I don't speak the language." They said, "The Lord will bless you." So they had a gathering at the Church of England at their church, their outdoor church, the big, the pause. And they said, you can speak to this group. And so the minister's in the middle, they're all sitting on the ground, and he stands up to speak with his translator. And he notices this woman standing on the side of the building, leaning against one of the pillars. And he motions for her to sit down, and she says no. And so he starts, and he gives the 2 sentences he knew in Tongan. And then was translated and was just mortified that he couldn't communicate with these people who had come to hear him as the new mission president at 22 to speak. And all of a sudden it was like a telepathic circumstance with this woman. And he spoke for over an hour in fluent Tongan, the gift of tongues. And he remained fluent in Tongan for the remainder of his 3 years, while he served as the mission president of Samoa and Tonga on his mission. And then he related 2 experiences, and I'll be brief because I know we're moving along, where the sight of several Tongans was restored. And so one was a couple that wanted to go on a mission, serve as missionaries, and the wife had been blind since her childhood or since birth. And they were coming up the stairs to President Nelson's office, and he felt prompted to greet them. So he walked out to them, and they said, "We'd like to go on a mission, but Sister, Wiahungi," or whatever her name was, is blind. And he put his hands on her eyes, and her blindness was healed. That's in his journal. Okay. 2 years ago, Janet and I were on another cruise to Hawaii, and we went to the Honolulu Tabernacle, which is unbelievable. If you ever go to Hawaii, you should go see it. It's a great building. It was built in the 40s and dedicated by David O. McKay, and was basically promised it would be preserved through World War II, which is a whole nother incredible story about the pilot who came to try to bomb everything on the island, and that tabernacle kept disappearing. That's a great story, and it's true, according to many, many, many accounts. So Janet and I are going in to go to church on our Sunday stop in Honolulu, and had no idea which church we were going to go to. We just took Uber, LDS Church. We ended up at this tabernacle. In between the meetings, we got there at the end when they were singing the Aloha song to a sister missionary, and so we missed the sacrament. So we said, "Well, we'll stay for the next meeting," which was an hour later. So we're sitting there, and in walks this handsome Tongan man, late 70s, silver hair, well dressed. And, I love Polynesians, and I'm kind of outgoing. So I went over and introduced myself, and his name was Brother Wolfgram. And I said, "Wow, I had a missionary companion, Louis Wolfgram, in Australia, and who I loved, one of my favorite companions." He says, "Oh, I remember Louis as a boy. He's my nephew." Everyone in Tonga is related one way or another. And so I'm talking to them, and while we're talking, Janet, who's the spiritual one in our family, she says to him, she says, "Brother Wolfgram, have you ever heard of President John Alexander Nelson's miracles while he was the mission president in Tonga? He goes, and he stopped and he looked at her, he says, President Nelson healed my grandmother's blindness. So we met 2 years before someone who said that John Alexander Nelson healed his grandmother's blindness. And that's when we went to Tonga. We went to various spots where the saints were to have that. And this is a classic. We get an Uber, and we were getting in one car, and then Brad Nelson goes, no, we should go in this one. So we went over in this other car, and there was this heavy set, older patriarch, older Tongan gentleman, seemed very nice, spoke pretty good English. We're driving, and we always would say, take us to the LDS temple, or take us to the LDS missionaries or whatever. And we brought up the church, and he goes, are you members? And we said, yes, we're members. He goes, oh, I'm a patriarch in one of the Tongan states. He's the Uber driver and one of the drivers, the taxi drivers. And we started talking to him. That was the first day he had ever driven a taxi in the island. He had just retired as the enforcer of the Tongan government law that bans smoking. Smoking is outlawed in the country of Tonga.
Interesting.
And the Latter-day Saint enforcement director for all of Tonga is a patriarch and had been a stake president. And he had retired. And for the day, he said to his daughter, he says, I think I'm going to go and pick up some of the tourists from the cruise ship today, just to feel. And so he took us on a tour of the island, and then we met his daughter, and she was a returned missionary, and took us to meet his wife. I mean, we just had some marvelous, marvelous experiences. So my advice to people when they go on cruises or when they go on vacations, you'll never know what you'll find. We went to the Bora Bora church in Tahiti that they talked about in conference, the 24 youth that were there from Bora Bora. We met some of those youth and actually contributed to their trip because they were so excited of coming to conference. So we had just miracle after miracle, both on the ship when we held our own little sacrament meeting. We met some other members and made some new friends. And then also in the islands as we toured the missionary legendary miracles of President John Alexander Nelson. And we're going to make a film about it and about those stories, because the stories are right up there with Groberg's experiences and also with Matthew Cowley's.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, John, you've always got some great experiences and stories to tell. Appreciate that. You and I need to get together in person. It's been a long time. So
it's been way, way, way too long.
St. George or up in the mountains there, one or the other. But
you're welcome. You're welcome to come anytime. And I actually have an event in Scottsdale the 5th through the 7th of May.
Okay.
So if you're in town, we should certainly hook up for a meal. And we're having wonderful things. Last little items. If you know somebody who's suffering from PTSD, depression, long haul COVID, or injuries from many of the protocols that happened, we're seeing miraculous results with people strengthening their immune system and fighting off some of these terrible, terrible problems that seem to be happening all around us. So we would encourage people, we are HSA and FSA approved.
Amazing.
Again, we just got an award.
We need to get Cardio Miracle set right in the middle of MAHA, John. It's got to be right there in the middle of MAHA.
We've been told, and we have our inroads there. I'm actually going to be in the first MAHA-sponsored film, sharing a little bit about Cardio Miracle, and there's 3 of them. I'm going to be in a couple of them, I've been told. And Cardio Miracle is actually right on the table with all the key people all the way up to the top of the MAHA movement of trying to help make America healthy again. So we're right in the midst of all that, and there'll be some exciting announcements in the days to come.
Yeah, on this 2-month trip that I had to Egypt and Turkey, I had run out of product and had not ordered, and so I can't tell you the difference that I went through for a couple of months. It's big difference, and so
we have to take about a suitcase full whenever we travel because Janet takes 4 to 6 servings a day.
Yeah. So it's
we're glad.
So I could definitely feel the difference. And
glad you lived through it, and glad to appreciate all your good work. And God bless all of your subscribers as they wander through this wilderness of fiery darts. Cling to the iron rod, cling to the Savior and the testimonies, because miracles are still happening, and we're all on the Lord's errand to try to help prepare for the second coming.
John, always great speaking with you. We'll talk again soon.
Okay, thanks, Greg.